What happens when a god of thunder is dragged from his hill, beaten with sticks, and thrown into the river? Imagine the scene. A wooden idol stands above Kiev. Its body is carved from timber. Its head shines with silver. Its moustache gleams with gold. For years, men have climbed this hill to swear oaths before it. Warriors have touched their weapons and called upon its name. Princes have sealed treaties beneath its gaze. In the summer heat, cattle have been brought forward. In the dark season, thunder has rolled across the sky like the voice of judgment. His name was Perun, Lord of Storm, Keeper of Oaths, God of lightning, war, rain, and the high heavens. But then came a new faith, and the old god was pulled down. They tied him, they dragged him, they beat him with rods, and they cast him into the Dnipro River. But here is the strange thing about thunder. You can break the idol, you can drown the statue, you can forbid the prayer. But when the sky splits open and the earth trembles beneath the storm, some names refuse to die. Welcome to this channel, where the forgotten gods of the ancient Slavic world finally get to tell their stories. Long before church bells rang across the hills of Kiev, long before saints' names replaced the names of old gods, and long before written chronicles tried to explain what had already begun to disappear, the Slavic world listened to the sky. It listened to thunder rolling over forests. It listened to rain striking wooden roofs. It listened to lightning splitting the ancient oak. And in that sound, many Slavs heard power, not soft power, not distant power, not the quiet wisdom of a hidden spirit whispering from the root of a tree. They heard command. They heard judgment. They heard Perun. In the world of pre-Christian Slavic belief, Perun was one of the most important divine figures we can still trace through historical sources. In Kievan Rus, he appears as the chief god of the ruling elite, the god invoked in treaties, the god whose image stood on a hill in Kiev, the god of thunder, lightning, rain, the heavens, war, and solemn oaths. But Perun was not only a god of princes. For farmers, he was the storm that could destroy the field or save it with rain. For warriors, he was the witness of weapons and blood oaths. For rulers, he was divine authority made visible. For ordinary people, he was the terrifying force that reminded them that the world above was alive. To understand Perun, we must enter a landscape of forests, rivers, hilltop shrines, sacred oaks, cattle sacrifice, iron weapons, and thunderstones. We must walk carefully between what the sources actually say and what later folklore remembers. Because Perun comes to us not as a complete mythology like Zeus in Homer or Jupiter in Roman poetry. He comes to us in flashes, a name in an oath, a statue on a hill, a god in a storm, a curse on the tongue of villagers, a pagan idol floating down a Christian river. And from those fragments, we begin. To find Perun, we have to become detectives. Not the glamorous kind with dramatic lighting and suspiciously perfect cheekbones, the more frustrating kind. The kind who spends half the investigation staring at broken texts, late copies, Christian chroniclers, folklore collected centuries after conversion, and scholars politely disagreeing with each other in footnotes sharp enough to cut stone. The first problem is simple. The ancient Slavs did not leave us their own pagan scriptures. There is no Slavic Iliad, no temple archive of Perun, no priestly handbook saying, "Here is exactly how to worship the thunder god, please preserve this for future YouTube creators." Instead, what we have are scattered reports written by outsiders, Christian chroniclers, later folk traditions, place names, language, comparative mythology, and archaeological traces. So when we speak of Perun, we must speak carefully. Some things are historically attested, some things are probable, some things are scholarly reconstruction, and some things are later folklore echoing something older. The earliest important clue may come from the 6th century Byzantine historian Procopius. Writing about the Sclaveni and Antes, early Slavic groups living near the Byzantine frontier, Procopius says they believed in one god, the maker of lightning, who was lord of all things, and that they sacrificed cattle and other victims to him. That line matters. But notice what it does not say. Procopius does not use the name Perun. He does not give us a hymn. He does not describe a statue. He does not tell us the god's family tree, favorite weapon, or mythic enemies. He simply tells us that these Slavic peoples worshipped a supreme divine figure associated with lightning. For many scholars, this looks very much like an early witness to the kind of thunder god later known as Perun. That is a reasonable connection, but it is still a connection, not a direct naming. This is where responsible storytelling matters. We may say, Procopius gives us evidence of a Slavic lightning god. We should not say, Procopius personally met Perun and asked for an interview. The name Perun becomes much clearer in the sources connected to Kievan Ruses. In the Rus Primary Chronicle, also known as the Tale of Bygone Years, Perun appears in connection with treaties and oaths. When rulers of Rus made agreements with Byzantium, pagan members of the Rus elite swore by their weapons, by Perun, and by Volos or Veles, who is often associated with cattle, wealth, and the earthier world of abundance, and the underworld. This is not just religion as decoration. This is Perun standing at the center of law, violence, diplomacy, and sacred fear. Imagine the scene. A prince gathers his men. The air is cold. The river road to Byzantium lies behind them. The treaty has been spoken. The terms have been agreed. But words alone are not enough. So the warriors lay their hands upon their weapons. Swords, spears, shields, the tools by which they live, rule, and die. And they call on Perun, not because Perun is gentle, not because Perun forgives easily, but because an oath sworn before thunder is not a casual promise. It is a challenge to heaven itself. Break this oath, and may the storm find you. In 980, according to the primary chronicle tradition, Prince Volodymyr established a pagan pantheon in Kiev. At the center stood Perun. A wooden statue of Perun stood on Perun Hill in Kiev, with a silver head and a golden moustache. That detail is extraordinary. A wooden body, a silver head, a golden moustache. This is one of the rare moments when the lost pagan world becomes almost visible. We are not looking at an abstract thunder deity. We are looking at a cult image, standing in a specific city, on a specific hill, connected with a specific political order. Kiev, before Christianization, was not merely a city of trade and power. It was also a sacred landscape. Its hills, rivers, and shrines carried meaning. Perun's image stood high, as a thunder god should, above the river, above the people, above the ordinary streets. And then, only a few years later, that image fell. When Volodymyr accepted Christianity, the old gods were removed. The primary chronicle tradition tells us that Perun's idol was dragged from the hill, beaten, and thrown into the Dnipro. The image was pushed away from the sacred center and sent down the river like a defeated king. This moment is one of the most cinematic scenes in all Slavic religious history, not because it gives us a myth, because it gives us a ritual death. The god of the sky is pulled down to earth. The god of thunder is beaten by human hands. The god of the hill is surrendered to water. And still, the story does not end there. Some versions of the tradition remember the idol floating downriver and washing ashore. The old god leaves the city, but he does not simply vanish. His image moves through the landscape like a memory that refuses to obey the new order. This is why Perun matters. He is one of the few Slavic gods whose historical presence appears in multiple layers: foreign description, chronicle evidence, state cult, oath ritual, later folklore, and linguistic survival. But we must be careful with another famous part of Perun's mythology, his conflict with Veles. Many modern retellings describe Perun and Veles as cosmic enemies. Perun rules the high sky, the mountain, the oak, and the storm. Veles dwells below, linked with cattle, wealth, serpentine or chthonic powers, and the underworld. In these reconstructions, Veles steals Perun's cattle, family, or cosmic order, and Perun pursues him with lightning, striking trees, stones, animals, and hiding places until rain restores fertility to the earth. This is powerful. It is beautiful. It probably preserves something ancient, but the full myth does not survive in an ancient Slavic epic. What we have is a scholarly reconstruction built from comparative Indo-European mythology, Slavic and Baltic parallels, folklore motifs, Christianized legends of saints fighting dragons or demons, and the recurring opposition between thunder gods and underworld or serpent figures. So, in this episode, we will tell that story honestly, not as a preserved ancient scripture, but as a reconstructed mythic pattern, a storm memory, a shape left behind after the statue is gone. The same careful approach applies to Western Slavic evidence. Western Slavic traditions include a figure sometimes called Perun in sources connected with oak grove worship, and some scholars connect this figure with Perun. But again, we must not flatten everything. Perun may be connected with Perun. The oak grove setting fits thunder god symbolism, but the evidence is not identical to the Kievan material. The strongest historical Perun belongs to the world of Kievan Rus and broader Eastern Slavic tradition. The wider Slavic and Balto-Slavic thunder god complex surrounds him like a storm front, but the named, chronicle-attested Perun stands most clearly on the hill above Kiev. So where does Perun come from? At the deepest level, he likely belongs to an ancient Indo-European family of thunder gods. His name is often compared with Baltic Perkunas and Latvian Perkons, divine figures tied to thunder. The linguistic relationship suggests an old Balto-Slavic or Indo-European thunder tradition, one associated with striking, oaks, storms, and heavenly force. But for our story, Perun is not just an Indo-European formula. He is not only the Slavic Zeus. He is not only the local Thor. He is not only a scholarly footnote with a hammer. Perun is the god who stood where power met fear, at the edge of the forest, above the city, inside the oath, within the thunderstorm. At the moment when a warrior promised truth with a sword in his hand, and that is where we will meet him. Close your eyes. The sky is dark, but not yet night. Clouds gather above a hill. The river below is wide and black. The air smells of rain, smoke, and wet earth. Somewhere in the distance, cattle shift uneasily. On the hill stands the god. His body is wood, cut from the living world of forest and oak. His head shines silver, catching what little light remains before the storm. His moustache is gold, severe and bright, the mark of dignity, age, command. This is not a soft image. Perun does not appear as a dreamy forest spirit wandering through flowers, handing out vague wisdom to people in linen shirts. Perun belongs to the hard edge of sacred power. He is imagined as mature, strong, and commanding, a lord of the high places, a god whose presence presses down like thunderclouds. If we picture him in human form, we should not picture delicate beauty. We should picture force, broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes like stormlight, a beard or moustache touched with the color of fire and metal, a cloak dark as a rain-heavy sky, a weapon in hand. The sources do not give us a complete ancient portrait of Perun's face or clothing. The most concrete description is the Kievan idol: wood, silver head, golden moustache. Everything beyond that must be painted carefully from symbol, comparison, and later tradition. His first symbol is thunder itself. Not just sound, but divine speech. In traditional societies, thunder was never only weather. It was a sign. It could bless, warn, punish, cleanse, or announce. The thunderstorm was the sky becoming active. The god was not hidden behind the storm. The storm was one of the ways people experienced him. Then comes lightning, the heavenly weapon. A flash so bright it seems to tear the world open. A strike that can split an oak, kill a man, ignite a roof, or mark a place forever. Lightning is Perun's judgment made visible. It descends from the height of the heavens to the vulnerable world below. And the tree most often associated with thunder gods across the Slavic and Baltic world is the oak. The oak stands tall. It draws lightning. It lives long. It anchors memory. In many Indo-European traditions, the oak is a tree of sky gods and thunderers. Symbolically, the oak fits Perun almost too well. It is not a fragile tree, it is a ruler among trees. Its roots descend deep. Its branches rise like arms toward the storm. A sacred oak dedicated to Perun would not need marble columns or a golden roof. The living tree itself would be the temple. Imagine worshippers gathering beneath it. The leaves are wet. The bark smells of rain. A fire burns nearby. Weapons are laid out. A bull is led forward. Voices fall silent when thunder answers. Procopius tells us that the early Slavs he described sacrificed cattle and other victims to the lightning-making god. That gives us one of Perun's most important ritual associations, cattle sacrifice. This does not mean every Slavic community worshipped in exactly the same way. Ancient religion was local, practical, and deeply regional. But cattle were wealth, survival, and social value. To sacrifice cattle was not symbolic pocket change. It was costly. It meant the god mattered. The bull, the ox, and the he-goat appear in later discussions of Perun's symbolic world. The bull especially fits the storm god: strength, virility, bellowing force, fertility, and sacrifice. But again, we must distinguish what is directly sourced from what is symbolic reconstruction. Perun's weapon is another major symbol. In later tradition and comparative mythology, he is associated with the axe, hammer, arrow, or thunderbolt. These are all forms of heavenly striking. A lightning bolt is the sky's axe. An axe is human lightning held in the hand. Small axe amulets are often discussed in connection with Slavic and broader Eastern European thunder god symbolism. The axe protects. The axe strikes. The axe marks the boundary between order and threat. But in the primary chronicle oath scenes, the weapons of warriors are especially important. Men swear by their weapons and by Perun. That pairing is powerful. It tells us that Perun was not only a storm god of clouds and rain, he belonged to the warrior's world of steel, danger, and consequence. A sword could become more than a sword, a spear more than a spear. In an oath, a weapon became a sacred witness. And then there are stones. Across many European folk traditions, unusual stones, fossilized objects, or ancient stone tools were sometimes interpreted as thunderstones, objects cast down by lightning or left behind by the storm. Imagine finding a strange black stone in a field after a storm. To the modern mind, perhaps it is geology. To the older mind, perhaps it is proof. The sky has struck here. The god has touched the earth. Perun's sacred sites also follow his nature. Hilltops, high places, oak groves, open spaces where the sky can be seen, places where the storm arrives first. Perun Hill in Kiev is the most famous example. The image of the god standing above the city gives us a vertical sacred geography. Perun above, people below, river beneath. The god of the high heavens placed physically high in the human world. That matters. A god of thunder does not belong hidden in a cellar. He belongs where the storm can see him. And then there is fire. Not hearth fire, necessarily. Not the quiet domestic flame, but lightning fire, sudden fire, sky fire, the terrifying purification of a bolt that burns what it touches. Perun's world is full of sharp contrasts. Sky and earth, fire and rain, weapon and oath, tree and lightning, hill and river, life-giving storm and deadly strike. This is why Perun cannot be reduced to one simple phrase. He is not merely god of thunder, though that is true. He is not merely god of war, though that too is true in later Kievan context. He is not merely god of rain, though farmers would have felt that deeply. Perun is the force that descends from above to restore, punish, fertilize, and command. He is the crack in the sky. He is the oath you fear to break. He is the gold-mustached idol on the hill. He is the old oak blackened by lightning and still standing. To understand Perun's role, we must imagine a world where survival depended on forces no human could command. The farmer watched the sky. Too little rain, and the crops failed. Too much rain, and the fields drowned. Lightning could burn the barn. Hail could destroy months of labor in minutes. For the farmer, Perun was not abstract theology. He was weather with a will. A storm could be terrifying, but it could also be necessary. Rain brought fertility. Thunder announced the breaking of heat. Lightning purified the heavy air. In this sense, Perun was not only destructive. Like many thunder gods, he carried a double power. He could strike, but he could also renew. Perun destroys disorder. Perun clears the sky. Perun brings rain to the earth. Perun punishes the oath-breaker. For warriors, his role was sharper. The primary chronicles oath scenes show Perun standing beside weapons and treaties. This means he was tied to sacred legitimacy. When warriors swore by Perun, they were not simply naming a favorite god. They were placing themselves under the authority of storm and punishment. An oath in that world was not a private feeling. It was a public act, a legal act, a sacred act. To break it was not only dishonorable, it was dangerous. We can imagine a warrior standing before the idol. His sword is bare. His hand rests on the hilt. Smoke rises from sacrifice. A priest or prince speaks the words. The men repeat them. Above them, clouds gather. And somewhere inside every listener is the same thought. If I betray this oath, may Perun see me. For rulers, Perun offered something even greater, divine sanction. When Prince Volodymyr placed Perun's statue on the hill in Kiev, he was not decorating the skyline. He was organizing sacred authority. Perun's position at the head of the pantheon reflected political order. The god of thunder became the god of rule. A ruler needed more than soldiers. He needed legitimacy. He needed fear. He needed heaven on his side. Perun gave the prince a divine mirror. High, commanding, armed, severe. This is why Perun's fall after Christianization mattered so much. Pulling down the idol was not only religious reform, it was regime change in sacred form. The old source of legitimacy was publicly humiliated and replaced. For families and ordinary communities, Perun's role was probably felt through seasonal rhythms, storm anxiety, agricultural hope, and household protection. Later folklore often transfers thunder god qualities to Christian saints, especially Saint Elijah in Eastern Slavic traditions. This is one of the most important afterlives of Perun. Christianity did not always erase older patterns. Often, it redirected them. The thunder still came. The people still feared lightning. The fields still needed rain. The old questions still remained. Who rides in the storm? Who sends the fire from heaven? Who punishes wickedness? Who protects the harvest? In many Christianized folk traditions, Saint Elijah took on thunderous features. He rides across the sky. He commands storms. He resembles, in function, the older thunderer whose name had been pushed into memory. This does not mean people secretly remained pagan in a simple sense. Human religion is never that tidy, because humans enjoy making everything complicated and then calling it tradition. Instead, it means older symbolic patterns survived inside newer religious language. Perun's powers also included purification. Thunderstorms clean the air. Lightning burns. Rain washes. The storm terrifies, then renews. This makes Perun a god of boundaries, between truth and falsehood, between oath and betrayal, between drought and fertility, between chaos and order, between the old religion and the new. Taboos around thunder and lightning likely varied by region and period, but later, folk traditions across Slavic lands often treat lightning-struck places, storm times, and thunder-associated objects with special fear or respect. The basic logic is easy to understand. Where lightning strikes, the divine has acted. You do not casually mock the place where heaven touched earth. Offerings to Perun, especially cattle sacrifice, belong to the older ritual layer suggested by Procopius and later traditions. In a community dependent on livestock and harvest, sacrifice was exchange. It was not casual cruelty. It was a costly offering made in the hope of survival, victory, rain, or protection. Procopius also says that when these Slavic peoples faced death, sickness, or war, they promised sacrifice if they survived, and then fulfilled the vow afterward. This is a vivid religious pattern. Danger comes. The human makes a vow. The god grants escape. The human pays the debt. It is not sentimental religion. It is contractual, serious, and frightening. You do not promise the thunderer an offering and then forget. Perun's role in everyday life may therefore have been less like a distant king in the clouds and more like a power constantly near the edges of experience. When thunder sounded, he was present. When the oath was sworn, he was present. When the prince ruled, he was present. When rain saved the field, he was present. When lightning struck the tree, he was present. Perun shaped the world not by appearing every day in human form, but by making certain moments sacred and dangerous. The storm, the oath, the battle, the sacrifice, the harvest, the punishment. This is the key to his power. Perun was not separate from life. He was woven into the terrifying machinery by which life continued. Now we come to the emotional heart of the episode. But we must begin with a warning. We do not possess a complete ancient Slavic myth cycle of Perun in the way we possess Greek myths of Zeus or Norse myths of Thor. No pagan Slavic bard left us a written epic saying, "Perun rose at dawn, argued with Veles, threw 3 bolts, and then delivered this excellent dramatic monologue." What survives are fragments. So tonight we will tell 3 episodes. The first is historical ritual. The second is chronicle drama. The third is later folklore and scholarly reconstruction. Together, they reveal Perun's character: severe, oathbound, storm-bright, protective, violent, and impossible to fully bury. The men came armed. They did not come as beggars. They came as warriors, traders, envoys, men of river roads and iron. Before them stood the image of Perun. The hill was quiet. Below, Kiev breathed with smoke and timber. Beyond it, the Dnipro moved like a dark road to the south, toward Byzantium, toward wealth, war, and danger. The treaty had been spoken. Promises had been made. But a promise between rulers was not complete until heaven had heard it. A sword was drawn, then another. The metal caught the light. One by one, the men laid their hands upon the weapons by which they lived. Their blades had opened roads, defended boats, taken tribute, guarded princes. Now those same weapons became sacred witnesses. A voice spoke, "We swear, not by ink, not by parchment alone, not by a soft god of private thoughts, by weapons, by Perun, by Volos." The oath rose into the air, and above them, imagined or real, thunder waited. This is what Perun meant in the world of Kievan Rus. He was the god called upon when words had to become binding, when human agreements needed divine terror behind them, when politics required more than signatures. That tells us something about his character. Perun was not merely powerful, he was a witness. He saw, and because he saw, he could punish. A god of thunder is perfect for oath-making, because lightning is sudden. You can hide betrayal from a court, you can hide it from a prince, you can hide it from your neighbor. But how do you hide from the sky? Years passed. The hill still stood. The idol still looked out over Kiev. The silver head still caught the sun. The golden moustache still shone. But the world was changing. A new faith had entered the city. New priests came with crosses. New prayers rose where old offerings had burned. And Prince Volodymyr, who had once raised the pagan gods, now ordered them destroyed. Men climbed Perun's hill. Perhaps some came eagerly. Perhaps some came afraid. Perhaps some watched from a distance, saying nothing, because history often changes while ordinary people stand nearby, pretending this is all perfectly normal. Ropes were tied around the idol. The wooden god was pulled from his place. For a moment, he hung between heaven and earth. Then he fell. The sound of the fall must have been terrible, not because wood cannot fall quietly, but because an entire world fell with it. They dragged Perun through the streets. They beat him with rods. They hauled him toward the river. The god of thunder, once high above the city, was brought down to mud and water. Then they threw him into the Dnipro. The river took him. The current turned around the wooden body. The silver head flashed once. The golden moustache vanished in the water. The old god floated away. This scene, preserved in the primary chronicle tradition, is not a pagan myth told by pagan worshippers. It is a Christian chronicle memory of conversion. But that makes it no less powerful. In fact, It may be more powerful because it shows us how seriously Perun's image was treated. They did not ignore him. They did not simply remove him quietly. They staged his defeat, publicly, violently, ritually. To destroy the old religion, they had to make the old god powerless in front of the people. But symbols do not always obey. The image of Perun in the river became one of the most haunting images in Slavic religious history. The thunder god drowned. The sky god lowered into water. The lord of oaths beaten by men. And yet, after this humiliation, Perun did not disappear. His name survived in language. His functions survived in Saint Elijah. His storm survived in folklore. His memory survived in place, curse, and revival. This is the strange character of Perun. He can be defeated in history, but, in imagination, he remains standing somewhere beyond the next storm. Now we leave the chronicle and enter later folklore. In Polish and broader Slavic folk memory, the name of Perun survives in words connected with thunder and lightning. Polish Piorun means thunderbolt or lightning. In some later tales and folk expressions, the thunderer appears not as the polished god of a temple, but as a vast and frightening storm being still hunting through the world. One later folk episode tells of a hunter caught beneath a storm-dark sky. The hunter moves through the forest. The trees bend in the wind. The air is green-black before rain. Birds vanish from the branches. Then thunder rolls. Suddenly, the hunter sees a strange bird. Not an ordinary bird. Something uncanny. Something out of place. It darts between the trees as if fleeing. The hunter raises his gun. A flash of lightning opens the forest. He fires. The bird falls. Then the storm changes. The air grows heavy. The forest seems to hold its breath. A figure appears. Vast, terrible, old as thunder. The hunter cannot move. The being speaks, and his voice is the sound of the sky splitting over a mountain. "Why did you shoot?" The hunter trembles. "I thought it was only a bird." The figure looks toward the fallen creature. "I was pursuing it." In this later folklore, we do not have the official Perun of a pagan temple. We have an echo, the thunderer, as pursuer, hunter, judge, enemy of a fleeing creature. The details vary, and the source layer is much later than pre-Christian worship, but the pattern is ancient in feeling. The storm god hunts. Something dangerous flees below. It hides in animal form. It slips through trees, stones, waters, and roots. The thunderer strikes from above. This pattern connects with the famous reconstructed myth of Perun and Veles. In scholarly reconstruction, Veles is often imagined as Perun's great opponent, a chthonic god of cattle, wealth, magic, and the underworld. Veles steals something from Perun: cattle, family, water, or cosmic order. He hides below, perhaps in the roots of the world tree, perhaps in serpent form, perhaps among waters and dark places. Perun sees the theft. The sky darkens. From the high branches of the cosmic tree, from the mountain, from the storm cloud, Perun rises in fury. "Return what is mine." Below, Veles laughs from the roots. "Come down and take it, thunderer." The world holds its breath. Then Perun strikes. Lightning tears across the sky. The oak shakes. Stones split. Animals scatter. Rain begins to fall. Veles flees. He hides behind a tree. Perun strikes the tree. He hides beneath a stone. Perun splits the stone. He hides among cattle. Perun's thunder scatters the herd. He dives into water. The rain comes harder. At last, the stolen abundance is released. The waters return. The cattle are freed. The rain falls upon the fields. Fertility comes back to earth. This story is not preserved in one ancient Slavic text. It is reconstructed from comparative material and later folklore. But it explains why Perun is not only a violent god, he is a restorer. His lightning is not random. It hunts disorder. His storm is not only rage, it returns balance. His anger, at least in mythic logic, protects the world. And this gives Perun a personality deeper than simple power. He is severe because order is fragile. He is violent because chaos hides. He is terrifying because the world needs terror when promises are broken. He is not a comfortable god, but he is necessary. The obvious comparison is Zeus, or, in Roman tradition, Jupiter. And yes, the comparison makes sense. Perun, Zeus, and Jupiter all belong to the great Indo-European family of sky and thunder gods. They are associated with the heavens, lightning, authority, kingship, law, and the power to punish. Each stands in some relationship to order. Each carries the atmosphere of command. Zeus throws thunderbolts from Olympus. Jupiter governs with lightning and law from the Roman sky. Perun strikes from the storm above the Slavic world. But this is where the comparison must slow down, because Perun is not merely Slavic Zeus. That phrase is useful for 5 seconds, and then becomes lazy. Zeus comes to us through a vast literary tradition. Homer, Hesiod, tragedy, hymns, philosophy, local cults, Roman reinterpretation, Renaissance art, modern schoolbooks, and far too many paintings of Zeus behaving badly, because apparently divine kingship came with no human resources department. Perun comes to us differently. He comes through fragments, a Byzantine historian's unnamed lightning god, a chronicle oath, a wooden idol in Kiev, a ritual drowning, a word for thunder, a saint who inherits the storm, a folk curse, a reconstructed battle against Veles. Zeus is preserved as a character in a library. Perun is preserved as a force in a landscape. That difference matters. Zeus often appears in myth as political, erotic, deceptive, majestic, and deeply entangled in divine family drama. He has a court, a genealogy, a palace of gods, and stories filled with quarrels, lovers, punishments, and transformations. Perun's surviving image is more austere. He does not come to us primarily as a lover or trickster. He comes as thunder, as oath, as weapon, as hilltop idol, as punisher of betrayal, as rainbringer, as the storm that restores order. Jupiter, meanwhile, gives us another useful comparison. In Roman religion, Jupiter was closely tied to the state, treaties, law, and public authority. That actually helps us understand Perun's role in Kievan Rus. When warriors and princes swear by Perun, when his idol stands above Kiev, we see a god connected not only with nature but with political order. But Perun remains distinct. His sacred geography is not marble temples and imperial ritual. It is hill, oak, weapon, river, storm. His most haunting historical scene is not a triumph on a throne. It is his humiliation in the Dnipro. A god can tell you much about a culture not only by how he is worshipped, but by how he is overthrown. Zeus remains enthroned in myth. Jupiter becomes an emblem of empire. Perun is dragged through the streets and thrown into the river. And somehow, that makes him more humanly powerful. Because Perun's story is also the story of cultural memory itself, how a god can fall from official worship and still survive in words, weather, and fear. So yes, Perun shares thunder with Zeus and Jupiter, but Perun's thunder has a different echo. It rolls through forest and river, it strikes the oak, it seals the oath, it follows the broken promise, it survives without a Homer. Perun did not survive as an unbroken public cult in the way ancient worshippers would have known him. The idol fell, the sacrifices ended, the old hill changed, the prayers were replaced. But gods do not only live in temples, they live in language. In Polish, Perun means lightning or thunderbolt, preserving the thunderer's name in everyday speech. A person may say the word without consciously invoking the god, but language has a long memory. Sometimes older than belief, sometimes more stubborn. In Ukrainian tradition, Perun's memory is especially important. Some sources note that traces of Perun's cult survived into the 20th century among Lemkos in western Ukraine. A severe traditional curse is also remembered. May Perun strike you dead. That curse matters. It shows Perun not as a museum object, but as a force still alive in speech. To curse someone by Perun is to imagine the thunderer as still capable of striking. Even when formal worship is gone, the old god remains in the emotional vocabulary of fear and punishment. Perun's qualities were also transferred to Saint Elijah in Eastern Slavic Christian folk tradition. This is one of the clearest examples of religious transformation. Saint Elijah rides the storm. Thunder becomes his chariot. Lightning becomes his heavenly weapon. The name changes. The pattern continues. This kind of survival is not unique to Slavic tradition. Across Europe, older divine functions were often absorbed into saints, feast days, folk rituals, and local customs. But Perun's case is especially dramatic because the thunder does not stop being thunder. People may change the theology, but the storm remains convincing. In modern Ukrainian, Polish, Belarusian, and broader Eastern Slavic cultural memory, Perun appears again in literature, art, music, historical fantasy, folk revival, and modern pagan movements often called rodnovery or, in Ukrainian context, ridnovistvo. Modern Slavic native faith is not ancient paganism preserved unchanged in a sealed jar, despite what the internet sometimes claims after 3 minutes of confidence and no sources. It is a modern religious revival and reconstruction, drawing from folklore, historical sources, comparative mythology, national traditions, and contemporary spiritual needs. For some modern practitioners, Perun is once again honored as a god of strength, truth, courage, order, and protection. For others, he is a cultural symbol, rather than an object of worship. In art, he often appears with axe, hammer, lightning, eagle, oak, or storm cloud. In music and literature, he becomes a sign of ancestral depth and mythic power. But the most important legacy of Perun may be quieter. Every time thunder is described as a force of judgment, every time lightning is imagined as punishment, every time an oak struck by lightning feels sacred, every time an oath feels heavier because it is spoken before something greater than human law, there, Perun's shadow remains. Remembering him in the 21st century matters not because we need to return simplistically to the past. The past was not cleaner, wiser, or more magical just because it lacked Wi-Fi and had more wolves. Romantic nonsense is still nonsense, even by candlelight. Remembering Perun matters because he reveals how the ancient Slavs understood power. Power was not only political, it was cosmic. Truth was not only spoken, it was sworn. Nature was not only scenery, it was alive with agency. The storm was not only weather, it was a moral event. Perun reminds us that ancient religion was not just a set of stories. It was a way of standing inside the world, under a dangerous sky, knowing that human life depended on forces beyond control. And perhaps that is why he still speaks. Not because we believe exactly as ancient people believed, but because we still know what it feels like when thunder stops conversation, when lightning makes the room go silent, when the sky reminds us that we are small. At the beginning we asked, what happens when a god of thunder is dragged from his hill, beaten with sticks, and thrown into the river? Now we know the answer. The idol can fall, the statue can break, the river can carry the old god away from the city that once feared him. But Perun was never only wood. He was the storm over the field, the weapon beneath the oath, the rain after drought, the lightning in the oak, the punishment waiting above the lyre, the old name hidden inside thunder. History tried to drown Perun, but every storm became a kind of memory, and somewhere, beyond the hill, beyond the river, beyond the broken idol, the thunder still rolls. In the next episode, we descend from the sky into the roots of the world to meet the god who may have been Perun's greatest rival, Veles, lord of cattle, wealth, magic, and the deep places beneath the earth. Because where thunder strikes from above, something ancient waits below. Perun fell into the river, but his voice never left the sky.